So Ben, could you perhaps start off by introducing yourself and telling me a little bit more about Energised Futures by Centrica, please?
Yeah, absolutely. And firstly, hi, I'm Ben as well. Good choice. I'm Director of Research and Innovation, so I lead within Centrica the team known as Energised Futures. So we're about 2 years old in setting up the team and building it. We are there to do the innovation that accelerates the energy transition. So we really work across all the technologies and all the markets that are evolving to bring that about. So we look at 6 different pillars, different topics, but essentially we marry that technology innovation with behavior science to understand from a customer perspective, whether that's for homes or businesses, how do you bring about the transition? And that means that we're doing projects from like energy communities, vehicle to grids, charging, but also a lot of work on data centers and how do we support them.
Wonderful, thank you. So let's talk a little bit about AI. Is it currently a hungry tenant that the energy grid is struggling to feed? Or is AI actually the smart brain, the solution that's going to finally make our grid efficient enough to survive the wave of data center demand?
I guess it's both, right? Is that a valid answer? It's both, because it's clearly a hungry beast, right? I think it's projected to go up 4 times over the next 10 years, and it's in terms of energy demand, and it's very clear like the number of data centers that need a grid connection is also gone up about 6 times in the last 6 months. So it's a clearly hungry beast. Yeah. But at the same time, the ability for AI, whichever form of AI, obviously AI is a very broad term, but it has the potential to massively help how we decarbonize, whether it's better forecasting, helping us make better investment decisions because we can plug in more data to those decisions, optimizing the grid in real time. So it has the potential to help the grid really decarbonize, and we're using it in serious ways. But all of the other pieces of AI are very, very energy intensive, so it's a bit of both.
Wonderful, thank you. So in terms of your new team and the research and the innovation that you've been exploring, what would you say is one of the most surprising discoveries that you've come across in the past 12 to 18 months that you think is worth noting?
I think we've been, well, there's a few. I mean, I think one of the ones is the potential for the backbone of how we connect all these things together to be changed. So we've got a whole piece of work right now on DC connected microgrids.
Yep.
There was I think 100 something years ago, there was a big DC versus AC battle, right? And obviously most of the grid is today AC connected, but the potential for an efficiency gain by switching everything within certain boundaries to DC is quite significant. It's at least 15-20%, which actually in the scheme of things is a sizable benefit. So I think, how that plays out, that's something we're very actively working. We've got a pilot coming up later this year to explore this. I think the other area is flexibility. We do one of the 6 pillars I mentioned is flexibility. Yeah. And if you bring AI and automation with that flexibility, the ability to shift loads either in response to the grid, or whether it's cheaper energy or greener energy at a given moment, or congestion. If you can demonstrate the ability that you can run your data center in a more flexible way than to the distribution networks, there's a potential that you can get away with a much smaller grid connection and therefore accelerate the chance to connect. It's clear that not everything can take advantage of that flexibility, but there's lots of evidence. I think there's been studies that have shown there's no impact on any critical loads. So yes, you have to perhaps shift your use to another data center somewhere else, or you have to delay when you're going to run your training. But the ability to actually do that allows you to use the energy more efficiently and potentially even get value back in the data center itself.
Are there any particular case studies that come to mind that you think are particularly illuminating in terms of demonstrating the innovation and the role of AI within a data center that you've come across?
I mean, there's lots. Right? There was a project that we weren't directly involved in the project, but it was, I think it was Google. We do work with Google in Europe, but it was a data center in the UK where they expected to connect it to a heat network, and the value there is obviously how you take heat, a waste product out of the data center and now support the local community in some way. What struck us there, I think, is that although everything was set up to make use of this, you had the heat network essentially to take out that heat, turn the heat now into value that would help. It couldn't go forwards because the heat network itself didn't materialize. The local council couldn't actually provide it. I think what I was struck by that is the gap then between the ambition and the technology, which is not the problem there, but the regulation and the local appetite for that maybe the investment case as well, right? And that's coupled to the uncertainty you have in the system.
Wonderful, thank you. So we often talk about AI and energy as two separate industries. Are we reaching a point where they are becoming almost a single integrated smart infrastructure, where you can't have one without the other? What are you seeing on the ground with that, with your research?
Well, it's an interesting dynamic. Like, it's very clear that flexibility is going to become a very important piece of this. And when I say flexibility, firstly, maybe it's not clear. I don't know. When I tried to explain this to my family the other day, they were like, assuming it's gymnastics, and it's not. It's about shifting consumption, right, in some way or other, whether it's turning up or turning down in response to some time signal, or it's shifting location. So can you move your compute to whatever you're doing with your compute? Can you do that now somewhere else? It's pretty clear to us that that's going to become very important as we go forwards. But what the feedback we're hearing is it's just not the problem today, right? So we have to be ready for that. We have to set the system up so that we can leverage that. That our data centers aren't just an energy consuming machine, but actually, if there's local generation on the site, can it support the local network? Can it give power back to the grid? So then, but today the challenge is get connected, get the data center built, build it as quickly as possible, get the local generation on site. And so that tension is one of the things we maybe didn't expect to see so clearly, but it's coming through.
Wonderful, thank you. So I think, correct me if I'm wrong, within the concept of flexibility, one of the important aspects is speed, right? So the speed of innovation, the speed of research, and how we can make things catch up, right? So if innovation in AI is happening in weeks, but building a new power substation can take years, how does your Energized Futures team bridge that gap in terms of the timelines?
Yeah, we sort of start 1 year out and go 5-10 years as a team. That's sort of where we explore. For data centers, the analogy we use is sort of rivers, glaciers, and tectonic plates, right? A river is like this fast-running, churning, moving quickly, right? A glacier moves years to take us, and then tectonic plates are decades, centuries. And so AI itself, the pace of change in AI and the use of our data centers and the technology in the data centers is that river.
Yeah.
How quickly are how quickly the algorithms, the models themselves actually are developing.
Yeah.
There's the chips, right? I mean, can you build a custom ASIC that runs whatever transformer model you would like in there and massively more energy efficient because of it? So that's the river side of this. Then we have to build out the infrastructure, and infrastructure takes a big investment case, takes years to come through. That's the glacier, and that's already a challenge in that you're building your infrastructure today for a model or a use case that doesn't yet exist.
Yeah.
And then you've got the regulatory side, and that's the tectonic plate and all of this. Regulations don't move at the speed we might like, and we don't know which way they will go. And so we have to work to sort of champion that they move in the right direction. So a lot of stuff that we're working with our policy teams and regulation teams to make sure that comes out in the best possible way. And the challenge in all this is just competing timelines, right? And competing interests and competing stakeholders that have different. We see this in so many of our other projects. How actually the challenge is not the technology. It's not even in the understanding the people necessarily. It's just building the ecosystem together that all of the players align. Yeah. And when you've got these different timelines and different time horizons, that's a real challenge to navigate.
I think one of the talking points that we've come across in this event so far is it's all well and good having the energy, but making sure that it's connected properly. Can you talk a little bit about where you see some of the innovation going in terms of that direction in making sure that the infrastructure is powered and ready and effective?
Well, some of what we've been doing is so this DC microgrid work, for example, speaks a bit to that. How do we make sure that the power within the site is used as efficiently as possible? Yeah. But also, it's very clear, Centrica, the wider Centrica is seeing a lot of interest in getting local generation on site. But that, if you want to do that quickly, it's not necessarily going to be solar or battery, which you might like, because that's going to be renewable. It is forcing a lot of gas-based generation. And so where we've been working very closely with wider teams that are doing a lot of investment. I think probably you've seen some of the recent announcements around fuel cells. So we've got a big partnership now with Ceres, who are going to help bring fuel cells to this problem. The exciting bit about fuel cells is just that they're sort of 2 or 3 times more efficient in how they use. It's still very often gas. They could be hydrogen in the future, but they're significantly more efficient. The other thing longer term is are things like nuclear. Like how do we bring all of this new generation, and it could work in islanded modes, it could work just in the complex, but hopefully it's supporting the wider grid.
Yeah.
Very clearly, the challenge today is getting that connection to the grid, right?
Absolutely. I mean, we are seeing more data centers disconnecting from the grid to use on-site power.
Yeah.
And does this off-grid trend worry you at all from a research perspective, or is it the only way to protect the public's energy security?
I don't think it's the only way. I think what would worry me is if it only stays that way. If you've built an islanded data center that has its own supply, has its generation, I would hope that doesn't remain indefinitely. At some point, you'd want to hope that connects back. And the reason is that, firstly, the data center is going to continue to need more energy, and I hope that the grid is able to support that. But also, you can then start to support the grid itself. And for sure, on the sort of behavior science stuff that we do, we see that there's real uncertainty and sort of concern from customers in communities. If you've built a data center there and they know about it, but they maybe don't understand how it works and what it means, there's concern there that what's going to be the impact on the community. And if you're working in an islanded way, you've broken that connection to the community. If you can connect it back, maybe it's a heat network that now supplies, maybe it's not like that at all. It's actually just explaining what's going on in the data center, but that link is important.
I think this is the first time I've come across this concept of behavioral science informing the direction of digital infrastructure. Could you just elaborate on that a little bit in terms of how you weave that into your operations, what role it plays, and how does that kind of lead what you're doing?
I think we're very conscious that today the question is speed, but that question for speed and how quickly can we install and build, right? But there's a very big risk in that we get the perception we damage the perception of this whole industry by having to go out, install CCGs or NFTs on site to now power them. And we've seen this in other parts of our research for other things, right? For how do we, EVs, for example, EV adoption. The limit that comes in is often the perception of it, and so we have to. That's what we're trying to mitigate, is that we understand that well. Can we encourage people to make sense of it? There's this sort of everyone is using whatever ChatGPT or whatever other AI providers exist, right? So people are aware of the use case for it. But we've also seen that there's more and more of a discussion around, well, what's the real social benefit in that use case? Yeah. And then if you layer on top that the data center behind it isn't using, is using gas to power itself, or is, consuming a lot more energy or overloading the grid in other ways, that there's a real tension that emerges with our customers.
So based on your research into that behavioral science dynamic of being proactive to really comprehensively think about operations, if you had to kind of almost give some recommendations to data center operators in terms of how they can bridge that gap between the community and what they're trying to do, what would be some of the things that you'd recommend to them to really appreciate? I
mean, it's very easy to flip it. You don't have to do much to actually just to start engaging that community. I mean, we've seen this in other things where we built a lab very recently near Lutterworth Park, 35 million investment in this lab, and we wanted to make sure that the community around it was aware of it, would come in and engage. You didn't have to do much to go out to some schools or local businesses and sort of demonstrate the value this would bring. I think it's the same with the data center. I mean, it's an emerging trend, it's emerging technology. It's going to be fundamental to the infrastructure of the future. So you don't have to do much to say, look at what we're putting in your backyard. This is the what it means to you and the community. And then of course you could, if it has also a heat network or something else, like this in the future, there's a very tangible benefit as well. So
wonderful, thank you. So looking towards 2030. Do you envision a self-healing energy grid that is entirely managed by the AI that it's powering? And can AI even manage its own power during peak times?
Well, I mean, if you've got on-site generation, for sure, it will be able to support itself. I guess, assuming that not everything will go that way, or that the generation is not going to be sufficient for its the number one thing that trips an energy supplier up is forecasting. It's the biggest cause of any of imbalance pricing and so on. We've got the forecast wrong. We've missed forecasting how much demand there would be, or we've got the forecast wrong in terms of how much generation we will get from renewables. The obvious thing here is AI will improve forecasting, and forecasting, historically, you just look at a time series, you look at history, and you say, okay, based on that history, is what it's going to be. But to go further, you have to layer in all these other features. And so things like large language models can actually help in that, because they can then ingest whatever internet data, might social media trends, whatever, that say, okay, there's a lot of movement going this way, people are going to go that way, or do this, or go to this event, whatever, that it will improve the ability for us to forecast. So that's where the AI itself is going to help improve the way we operate the grid.
Wonderful, thank you. So in terms of, if you had to identify the first thing that AI should fix to ensure that we reach net zero by 2050, if you had to, what would you say that is?
To fix on the grid by 2050?
Yes, net zero by 2050.
I think the biggest challenge we're going to face is the amount of the energy, matching the energy demand with generation. If it can help us with things like storage, and if it can help us figure out better material science for chemistry and for the batteries, or for the sorts of fuel cells I'm mentioning, I think that's we're seeing this in drug discovery and in pharmaceuticals, the ability for AI to revolutionize how they approach discovering new drugs. I think for us as a energy industry, that's the sort of thing where I don't think we're scratching the surface maybe on it, but that's something that between now and 2050 I think could have a huge potential. Improving storage, right? So you can have more renewable that you're not curtailing because you don't have the demand for it, but you're storing it and then plugging it back into the grid and later on.
Thank you. So I think with any groundbreaking research and innovation, so often within the scientific community, it's actually a collaborative effort, right? So could you tell me a little bit more about how you and your team embrace collaboration, whether that's between companies or between you and research academic institutions? How does that work with you and your team?
Yeah, we're about 20 to 30 people in our team, so it's small, but it's powerful. But it's very clear to us that we're not going to be the ones alone that go and solve all of these challenges that we're facing. I guess it's why we're here today, is because we want to network and connect and have people reach out to us to do things. But we work across a few different stakeholders, let's put it that way. Obviously, we work with wider Centrica, so we work with, whether it's Centrica Business going out and building and supporting data centers directly, whether it's our Centrica Power teams that are building all the sort of nuclear and storage and things that I mentioned. But beyond Centrica, we have a whole program of works with startups. Can we support startups to leverage our own customer base, our routes to market, our ability to shape policy? Can we help those startups get through that sort of the valley of death, right, that they call it in investing? Can we help them take that technology out to the real world? And then the other place is universities. A lot of universities will have knowledge transfer departments where they want to take the original research and bring it to market. We're the sort of mirror image of that within a big business to sort of see what else is coming and how can we bring that to life.
Is there a particular example that you're allowed to talk about of a collaboration like this that you can shine a light on, that you are particularly excited by?
Let's say, without naming names, we've got a big program right now on vehicle to grid. So today, EVs take power from the grid, they charge up, and then they drive around, right? But in very near term, many cars are going this way already, they will be able to discharge energy back to the grid. And so that means that what is today a vehicle that is a expensive thing you buy and now you drive around becomes a battery that can be traded and support the grid in its own right. So the return on the payback time on switching to an EV is far quicker. I can't name names, I'm afraid, but yeah.
It was worth a shot.
Fair play.
So I think before we turn things over to the audience for any questions we might have there, I think, could you, in terms of with being part of Centrica, how important is that to what you're doing? What does that look like? And just sort of shine a light on that for us.
I guess the honest answer, it's a double-edged sword, right? It's a big company, Centrica. It's 10 million customers, 20,000 people, and we function like a startup within it. And so that comes with obviously the sort of challenge of we're trying to move this big company, work with a huge number of internal stakeholders, and that's the challenge side. But the very positive side of this is, we have the ability. Then we already have 10 million customers. If we have an impact on 1 or 2%, that's a huge impact overall. The ability to make change thanks to this larger vehicle is fantastic. And if we were a startup, we would have all of the risks and challenges that comes with. So it's a healthy dynamic, I'd say, let's put it that way. And we're here both to support the wider business, but also to challenge it, right? So look in different ways at different things, get ahead, work with partners you wouldn't be able to otherwise. So that's where we play in.
Wonderful, thank you. So I'm now going to open up the floor to any questions that we might have here. So if you've got a question, please do raise your hand. Don't be shy.
Tumbleweed. I've answered them all already. If there's nothing else.
That's okay.
Oh, you got on there.
Hiya. My question would be is how would you think that the infrastructure built today could actually be better equipped to handle renewables? You talked about the infrastructure being able to flick a switch to kind of go from gas-fired electricity to renewables. What would that look like, and kind of what time frame do you think that might fall into?
I think it depends on what infrastructure you're considering. Are you talking about? Do we talk about the networks themselves? Because that is clearly one of the constraints today. If you've got lots of generation happening in one part of the country and you can't use it locally, you rely on the transition networks to then dramatic to then bring that down elsewhere. So there's the network itself. That there's a lot of investment that has to happen there, and the technologies that go into that are themselves interesting. There's also obviously on the generation side. Where, I mean, the sorts of fuel cell things I mentioned there, that's very interesting. Obviously, maybe hydrogen has a role to play, at least in terms of very long-term storage. I think all the stuff that we're doing, I guess I've mentioned it a few times, but these DC microgrids are pretty interesting, are pretty exciting, because they allow us to connect devices that are natively DC, take solar or batteries, or an EV charger, or a data center, right? A data center internally is DC. So by removing all of the different inverters you would typically put into an AC grid, you get much better efficiency locally.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Have we got any other questions there? Okay. Well, as we've got no questions from the audience, I'm going to add another one in. I hope you don't mind. Mm-hmm. In terms of looking ahead to the next 12 months, what innovation, development that you haven't discussed already, do you think is perhaps the most exciting frontier that you're looking at as it stands?
There's certainly one development I should mention, which I forgot to do so far, which is that we have a paper coming out soon on the future of data centers. It's a few weeks away. And so there's still an opportunity if people want to kind of feed into that, please do. So there's a development for you that's very soon. In terms of the next year, let's see. We've got, I think, energy communities is probably going to be one that I'm most excited about. So the idea of an energy community is today you might talk about optimizing devices within a single building, maybe run your heat pump in a certain way that is aware of the energy profile, or you charge your EV in a certain pattern that uses energy better. An energy community stops looking at just the whole building, a single building, and now looks at a whole neighborhood, a whole business park, and so on. And so suddenly all of these devices that have intrinsic value and are only being used for the single user, single building, they unlock all this extra value for the community. What's really exciting in that is if you've got a community that's got very mixed profiles. So obviously, if you have a community of houses, that's interesting. One house might have solar, battery, another might have EV charging, and so on. So you've already unlocked something. But if you now layer in businesses, and that could obviously include data centers, they have such different profiles in terms of when they use their energy, when they might generate energy. That's very complementary. And if today you're only exporting back to the grid at large, you're potentially missing out on some of the value of actually export to your neighbors or export to the local community in a different way. So we've got a bunch of work coming out on that over the next year or so, pilots and so on, to sort of really validate how this works, prove that it's possible, what's all the different value, how do people understand it? Again, behavior science side. Is it scary? Does it? That's thing. So yeah, that's probably one.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ben. It's been an incredible fireside chat. Thank you so much.